We have Matthias Burchardt, the Education Minister, with us now, who will support us here with some additional findings, maybe also in the context of media structure, maybe also from the point of view of the psychological situation of the population. So how can we put it? This rift that goes through the population, does that come from the activity of the media, and how can we intervene in order to come to a more positive way of living with each other again? That is a big problem for our interim government, that we, on the one hand, we are in favor of democracy and participation and want everyone to be involved, but we also know that people are caught in these structures mentally, and we have to identify all these ideology, and I would like to see an independent commission there that can actually analyze all of this and comes up with recommendations, and then we have to come up consider what kind of what do we want to achieve. And I think that the European tradition offers humanism here, and if we have this as the basis for our educational system, then I think we have the huge opportunity to avoid a repetition of these events. We have great opportunities for the development of the individual and our democracy, and business would also benefit from this. We can see that with these reforms, the educational quality has deteriorated to the point where people can't even be trained in the professions anymore. So I think this could liberate a lot of energies and start a new departure into a new future. Schools should be based on humanism. They should be a place of leisure, of growth, and it has become a place of cold darkness, of psychological, of mental injury. This has not started with the Corona pandemic. It has culminated in it. These things have been analyzed and determined. They are well known, and we can overcome this in a short time if we want to.
That we have to go back to the roots, we have to get our sovereignty back to the regions, and especially, that's my personal opinion, we have to split off from these supranational institutions, because I don't think these can be saved. I don't think the WHO can be reformed. I don't think the EU can be reformed. They have to be reduced to the European Economic Unit. Professor 𝗚𝗃𝗍𝗺, would you also say that these institutions like the PISA guidelines, which were freely invented, that you don't think this is very good for a good education?
Absolutely, I agree in full. We've discussed that before. In the media, in sciences, education, centralism is always a mistake, because it's always linked to power, and it's always linked to impose certain viewpoints. They may be well-intended, they may be even good, but it's always this agenda. And it's not compatible with an open society. We have to go piecemeal, we have to do it from the bottom up, we have to try different things in different regions, different communities. We have to give them the freedom to go their own way, to choose their own way, and then we can see what works best. And this is why it has been said about the media, everybody must not live in their own world. We need media fora where we can exchange views, but that's where we've seen that new supranational organizations seize ever more power, making rules for individual governments. So I see the risk that the national states, about which one can say good things and bad things, will disappear. Not to the benefit of the regions, to come to more grassroots approaches, but towards a supranational dictatorship of so-called experts. You can read it in Mr. Schwab's script. business tycoons who basically overcome state rule because they are private organizations. They're definitely not democratic organizations, and this is runs counter to the democratic idea. In the past, one would have said they are supported by the religions, and today they are supported through pseudosciences, and they buy the expert opinions that they need. That's the real danger that I see. Of course, there's national state principle as it worked in the past by the central powers, central states seizing central power. I think that this is outdated. This has been made clear by the Corona crisis. But if we ask ourselves, why does this happen? It's one experiment to impose control. You can always say with masks, you go along with that and get a vaccination, why not? But that's not all. It's an experiment of population control. Then it's not controlled by national governments, but by supranational organizations that make rules for individual governments. And there must be no debate because they know it all, and there is no democratic debate about it either. It's like in China or Russia, where the Politburo or whoever has the power.
What is wanted here is a dissolution, dissolvement of the national state, but not by the people wanting the power back, democracy, but in getting rid of democracy in the favor of a global government which is not legitimized by anyone, even by the Pope with their encyclopedia from last year saying that you should submit to the world government of the EU. This is done by the same people, the same structures as the global structures that are already creating massive damage. Professor Ethel, you just mentioned that if we want to have science working in the regions as it thinks is appropriate, mistakes may happen, yes, but if we dictate top-bottom science, then mistakes may not happen, but they always will, and it will get us exactly to where we are at the moment, because that's the result of a top-to-bottom structure. Regional structures are the only ones that correspond to democracy. Great Reset ideas are fascist ideas, and what we see is a movement towards this. We've by now learned that the big platform of the World Economic Forum is not only the platform for this public-private partnerships, which is the merging. We have the takeover, the acquisition of the government by big corporations. And we can see this today already. Are the people who are ruling us have been elected from a list of the so-called young leaders. We have this with Macron, with Mr. Spahn, with the Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand. We have Mr. Kurz. All these people and many more come from this recruiting, and that cannot be the case. And the next one on the list, which is explicitly saying, I want to compare democracy to the Chinese structures, is Mr. Habeck. Mr. Habeck said this in an interview with a philosophy, and he didn't even complain. Richard David Precht said so, that the democracy is a bit slow, while the Chinese structures have a command and then they work immediately. We've gone that far, and this is madness, and it's a call-up for the rest of the world, not Germany only. So we have to get back to regional structures. Just as Maggie said, I want my sovereignty back. Dictatorship has a central control which decides about the future, which put everything in the hands hands of experts, and if I put the future into the hands of the people, I have to enable people to think and decide on their own behalf. And then Kant says laziness and fearfulness leave people shy away from taking decisions, and that is always someone who takes the vacuum and says, I take the decision for you, I act for you, and I think we have to align our education system along these values: expertise, ability to assess situations and to come to their own conclusions, involved in discussions politically, and become active.
The basis of democracy is the exchange of ideas. It's the only reason why the American Constitution, as the First Amendment, got the freedom of opinion, not the 20th Amendment, the first. Because without freedom of opinion, you can't have a thriving democracy. Only if people can say their opinions, you can exchange ideas. And that is preempted by central structures. Always a question of power. I didn't realize that before you said it, Professor Eshfeldt. It's always power structures, and they tend to abuse.
And we have to bear one thing in mind here. It's not, as we've just hinted at several times now, that's only several areas that have not been maintained in the educational system, that it's not only that critical thinking has not been fostered, but it's been taken active action. The Americans call it the dumbing down of the population. So actively trying to make people stupid, using the media with things like Germany looks for the best model and so on, completely taking the focus off the different content. And that what made it possible that we have a generation, at least with a few exceptions obviously, who are not able to ask critical questions and that follow these ideals which are actively presented here, not by leaving out. If we look at what's propagated here in these TV shows, it looks like a secret schedule. So it is maximum competition, kicking people out. So it's brutal competition. Why should not all of them become good models? And then we have something like a mantra which is repeated. You can do everything if you try hard enough, and you have to accept everything if you want to get to certain positions. So 𝗚𝗃𝗺𝗃, a colleague from Freiburg University, looked at this and showed that this has a sociological program to it. I understand what you say, Minister, that we don't pick up on the special factor overlooking something else, but we have the power of media here as a shaping power articulated in the society, creating facts and moving education towards a performance and submission aspect.
The entire cultural scene was demolished. It didn't collapse, it was demolished. But people seem to do fairly well without culture. That's my impression, really, to be honest. In Weimar, there's no one in front of the National Theatre demonstrating for the reopening of the theatre. And we had very critical plays, left-wing plays. But since the pandemic started, the theatre has been closed. The employees get 95% of their wages, and that's it. Where does that lead? Well, I can tell you from my private life, from my experience, before I was appointed Undersecretary, I worked as a comedian as late as the beginning of this year. I had a program called Lies and Other Truths, and it was cancelled as early as March due to the Corona pandemic, and I don't know where to go here. And if there is any play on the plan that is critical, left-wing or whatever, then it is stopped for Corona reasons.
Also ich finde, wir sind von der Diktatur nicht mehr weit weg.
One point for the to-do list and that we should investigate in is that we look at the administrative structures, because for all what we do here, there are fake facades that if Wendy Brown called it the governance, that is modern administration, creating the illusion of regionality. That's we take a low bottom entity, give it little money, and request it to find and be able to do what it's asked to do and see that their own goal. What we see here is a KPI control of information and control using the regional areas for fulfillment. So if we need political empowerment, we have to look at many different ways of communal administration. I'm not expert in the solutions here, but I think this is a field of administration, and funding has to be adapted to follow the political goals and not the political goals to follow that rationalization.
Well, we can fall back on the political experience of the health minister here, but one thing is obvious, it's no good if that is just a mirage. If you say, okay, here, region, you can do what you want, but you'll only get money if you do what we tell you to do. That is not what we want.
So that is something we should note. We need not discuss this now.
The money, I don't know if you can say that, the budget has to be allocated, and responsibility for it has to be with those who have the administrative power to utilize it. So the responsibility and the administrative power, budgetary powers, need to be go hand in hand.
Good. So I think that takes us to the end of the discussion for today. We have covered everything that was possible to cover in the time that we've had. We all agree that we have to get back to regionality, and we have to avoid things getting worse than they had come. Luckily, we can decide now, and what must not happen is that a global government is takes the space of the principle that we are thinking of now. Professor 𝗏𝗏𝗺 pointed this out a couple of times as a supernatural structure. This has included the misuse of power, and maybe it is its only purpose. Professor 𝗏𝗏𝗺, I'm very grateful to you. I think that was lighthouse insight of the thoughts that we even agreed on, but that we have not formulated fully yet. So that has helped to clarify things. We have a structure that we can take up on. Thank you very much.